Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 6th Karachi Literature Festival. Yes. Before the start of the session, we have certain ground rules. We would request you to switch off your cell phones or keep them on silent mode. And the duration of the session would be 1 hour long. Format of the session is 45 minutes of discussion between our esteemed guests. Last 15 minutes would be between question and answers.
I think your mic is not on.
Yes, can you hear me now? Okay. Yeah, so the last 15 minutes would be for the question and answers. When the question and answer session starts, we will request you to keep your questions short and concise and please refrain from making any outrageous statements. Thank you. There might Okay, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's session. The session title is Mental Health in a Troubled City. Our moderator is Mr. Murad Moosa Khan. Dr. Murad Moosa Khan is a professor of psychiatry at Khan University, Karachi. He's a graduate of the Dow Medical College, Karachi, member of Royal College of Psychiatrists, UK, and has a PhD from University of London. His research and clinical interests include socio-cultural factors in suicide and attempted suicide, mental health of women and elderly, psychocosmetic medicine, and ethics in medical practice. Thank you. The session is yours.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the session. I think the fact that there's so many people here could probably mean that we are all under a lot of stress, which is a good and a bad thing. I guess it's a good thing because there's more awareness. It's a bad thing because it affects us adversely. So the title of this session is Mental Health in a Troubled City. It could well be Mental Health in a Troubled Country, because what we are going through and what we've been going through for many, many years now is creating a lot of problems, issues, turbulence, chaos, mayhem for all of us, and we are all suffering. And if you happen to be the hapless citizen of the city, then you can multiply that by 10 times. We all know this. But we all have to live here. And majority of us live out of choice, some by compulsion, and some who, even though they may have the opportunity to go abroad, still choose to live here. We live here because we like this place. We like this the city. We like the people. We like the whole atmosphere. But what do we do? What do we do when we are faced with such adverse circumstances? How can we survive? How can we still have a positive attitude despite this? And what happened a couple of months ago, or maybe less than a couple of months ago, on 16th of December in Peshawar? What do we do then? Schools have been asked to raise the walls, increase the security. But will that prevent from all this from happening? Will the terrorist target shopping malls, for example, or hospitals, or public parks, or open spaces? Do we build walls around all of these places? So where are the answers amongst all this chaos and mayhem? And the answers have to be there, and it has to come from us. And the discussion that we're going to have today does not only apply to people living in Defence and Clifton, in a little comfort zones, with our own generators and our water tankers and our security, but really applies to the whole population of Karachi. The vast majority of that do not have the kind of privileges that we have. But it is our responsibility as the educated class, as the ones who are aware, to give our input, to generate the discussion, and to bring about the changes. So it's very important. So I'll introduce the panelists. On my immediate left is Dr. Saadia Quraishy. Dr. Saadia Quraishy is a psychiatrist. She had been in England for many years. She returned a couple of years ago. She is with the Aman Foundation, which is an NGO working in health and many other social sectors also. She's heading the mental health initiative of Aman Foundation called Mashal. And she's also involved, as I am, with Dr. Saadia in another community mental health program called Basic Needs. So welcome, Saadia. Dr. Ayesha Mian is a colleague of mine from AQU. Ayesha is a graduate of the Khan University. She is a child psychiatrist by training. She trained in the US. She returned about a year and a half ago, and she is now the current chairperson of the Department of Psychiatry. Professor Haroon Ahmed, many of you would know, is an eminent psychiatrist, one of the most senior psychiatrists of Pakistan. Professor Saab has been the head of Department of Jinnah Medical Institute, but has been in practice now for many years. He's also the president of the Pakistan Association of Mental Health, PAMH, which runs a free charity clinic for many, many years, and has been involved in many mental health initiatives. The latest one is implementing the Mental Health Act, which was made into an act in 2001, but has never seen the light of the day. It's still in the books and it's not implemented. So Haroon Saab's drive to have that implemented is ongoing. On the extreme left is my friend from many years ago. I won't say how many years ago because that will give out our ages. Mr. Naeem Sadiq. Naeem has been in the PAF. He's an engineer by profession, by background. He served in the PIA, but now for many years he is in kind of management consultancy, looking after quality issues in corporations. But he's a very active social activist, and many of you would have read his articles. He's involved in many areas, but de-weaponization, how do we get rid of guns from this country, is something that he's been passionate about and is pushing for that. This morning, as we were coming in, he was having a demonstration on the Hubara bastards and the sheikhs who have been coming and killing. So, Naeem, welcome to the session. So, can I start with you, Naeem, and ask you? And I know this is a very wide question. How did we get where we are? Can you take the mic?
Assalamu alaikum. With such distinguished psychiatrists on one side, I think there had to be somebody to represent the troubled city. I have a somewhat non-traditional views on how we got over here. Just a short while back, Arif Hassan was describing the problems of city, and he said land, housing, transportation are the core issues which have brought problems to us. I'm now taking a somewhat, which are absolutely correct things to say. I'm taking a slightly different view. I say there are two kinds of responses, one by the society, citizens, and one by the government have landed us into this trouble. First, the response by citizens. Citizens have taken a back seat. They have started to follow a policy called shrinking approach. Shrinking not in the psychiatric sense of the term, but in withdrawing, retreating, in giving up your spaces, your mental, emotional, physical, intellectual spaces. Once you withdraw and simultaneously you build barriers around yourself. As the trouble increases in the city, you build more barriers. You hire more guards. You take more weapons. You raise the height of your walls. The average height of Kot Diji and Rani Kot Fort is 20 feet. There are houses in Karachi and Lahore which exceed that height. So there is this approach of self-defense or wearing more and more PPEs or personal protective equipment. Now, this has no limits. For example, now we say the doctors should be given weapons. Now the teachers, as you know, have already been authorized weapons. The next stage will be the children from class 1 to 5 should be given 9mm, and above that a Kalashnikov. So there is no limit to shrinking, and this is also a suicidal approach, because it will if it keeps on going, then there will be no place left to shrink. The second issue that I want to bring up is the approach of the government. The government, the world over, has two kinds of approaches. One is a proactive approach, that is to say, before the problems are created, you take actions to preempt them. That is typically called a sane approach. The other is a half-sane approach, that is, you allow the problem to grow, to develop, and then you take some actions. The third is an insane approach, if I may be allowed to use. I'm really very careful about the people who are sitting on my right. Or a psychotic approach, which is that you first grow the problem, then you develop it, let it become very big, and then you announce that we will do something about it, and then you do nothing about it. Okay? Now, let me say, every problem that we have here, we have 20 million weapons going around in the town. Okay? They were grown, they were given, they were licensed, or I mean, not all of them, but many of them. There was 2 weeks back, there was an ad that we have opened the import of prohibited guns from outside. So there is a policy of patronage of weapons, and today we find that we have no control over them. Pakistan's constitution, Article 256 says you cannot have mafias, you cannot have private armies. Now there are at least 500 private armies in Pakistan which have people between 5 to 5,000. These are private soldiers. Now the law does not permit that. There are 103 million untraceable SIMs. They did not develop. We've been talking about them for the last 10 years. That stop this, please stop this. And every year the government announces, yes, we will stop them. And they didn't stop them. Okay. So now that 16 December happened, now there is a policy for that. There are at least 40 to 100,000 vehicles in this city which are unauthorized, illegal, unregistered, fake. Okay. We've been speaking about them for years that this can be stopped. There are methods, there are easy methods to stop all these things, but it's been not been done. So this is a policy which has, which could have been prevented, and there are methods to prevent all these three things. So I would put this approach by the citizens and by the state as two principal reasons for creating the trouble that we are in.
Thank you, Naeem. We'll come back to how can we address these problems. I think you made an important point that all of these problems can be addressed and resolved, which I think is very important. So we're looking for solutions, not just highlighting the problems which we all know about. Haroon Sahab, if I can come to you, you've been practicing psychiatry in Karachi for maybe 40 years or maybe more than 40 years, and you must have seen the changes that have taken place. Do you think mental health problems are increasing as the time has gone by? Are they the same, or have they actually decreased?
Actually, I would say that it appears that they have increased, but earlier on, sort of onus was taken over by the tombs and shrines and Maulvis and Taweez. So a lot of people who were suffering, they, because of lack of knowledge, they were going to these, and they thought that they were doing something. Quite a few conditions in psychiatry are self-limiting, so it gets credibility to the peer faqir wherever they go, and so they are recommended also. 1965 that I came back after training, and psychiatry was not taught in any college or any undergraduate. So all the family physicians were quite unaware of the existence of a very important disease like depression. Secondly, that what we try to do, because the government till today, as Naeem Sadiq has said, that whatever research you do and you show that this is what is happening, government does not respond. Even here, the other session with town planning, Arif Hassan's, they've been doing a lot of work, but it has not been. He said that projects have taken place instead of planning. So here, over a period of time, what we decided, actually the Pakistan Psychiatric Society, which I was part of it to start, we thought that mental illness, because people don't die and when people commit suicide, they commit suicide because शादी में फला नौकरी नहीं मिली वगैरह वगैरह, the short answer. Although I agree that about 70 to 80% of patients who attempt to commit suicide are suffering from depression. Now, depression is an expression of the stress that we are going through. At the moment, as our friend Naeem has said, that problem is so much that it is very difficult. It can be solved. It is very, optimistic view that it can be solved. But I think it is very getting bad to us. Going back, what we tried to do that the motto of the Pakistan Psychiatric Society at that time was that we should make people aware, and then the government will take care, now or later. The one thing that happened that in every medical college, Department of Psychiatry was established because PMDC said that that college will not be registered if they do not have psychiatry, and psychiatry was a compulsory subject. I was taught by what's the name? I forgot. No. Much earlier, 2 classes were used to be held, and it was quite a fun, in fact, because we used to attend that. But I'll share with you that one part of the program was that we were taken to Hyderabad at one time. It was called Giddu Bandar, which is now Sir C.J. Institute. And there we were, shown the place. That was on every Sunday. There was 4 annas tickets. पागलों को देखने के लिए ही भी लगा होता है. पागलों को कुछ खाना पीना ना दीजिएगा. So when my friend came back from England, who joined the mental hospital, we tried to show to the government that there's so much of land. If you just cultivate it and market the vegetables, then you will get more money. So that was stopped at that time. So what we started at that time is trying to draw programs for family physicians. After some time, when the first psychiatric conference was held, then we trained 5 or 6 general practitioners to do workshops.
Sorry, Haroon sahab, I'll come back to this, okay? If we can just stop there. You've defined the history of how it started. I'll come back to you. Okay?
Your question was that how it has changed.
You've answered that quite well.
Awareness ज़्यादा आई है.
Yeah. Okay, let me turn to Dr. Ayesha Mian. Ayesha, you're a child psychiatrist. You've been back about a year and a half, and in the time that you've been here, how do you see children being affected, growing up in this really troubled environment, and what kind of effects it's having on them?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Okay, so where to start? I guess this is a loaded question. When I came here, one of the thoughts that I had was that yahan pe, with regards to children, that the biggest problem that I wanted to tackle was the heavy bags that they were taking to school, because I thought that is, it's torture. We've got to fix that. We've got to sort of see what we can do with education and how that's causing a lot of anxiety in children. And also in terms of, there were kids who had some sort of, थोड़े बहुत learning disorders हैं, थोड़ा बहुत ADHD है, and they are being targeted, or they're being called in school that they're not doing well, ये पढ़ाई में कमज़ोर है, इनका दिमाग कमज़ोर है and stuff. So those were going to be sort of some of the things that I thought that we needed to look at and we needed to focus. However, the reality sort of is sort of different यहाँ पे कि इतना ज़्यादा, there's so much stress and anxiety because of the troubled city and the troubled country, that the parents are anxious. I'll come to children a little bit later. The parents are extremely, extremely anxious. They are very anxious about taking their kids to open spaces. They're anxious about taking their kids to the parks to play. They're very, very anxious of, letting them go and play in their friends' houses, to have play dates with them, because they have no idea who's living next door to them and what kind of sort of, things are being taught to their children in their households. So when the parents are anxious, and then of course now we have a completely, Dr. Murad ne thoda sa allude bhi kiya usko, after the Peshawar incident, I think just a completely new fear has taken over all of us. Schools बच्चों के लिए सबसे safe haven होते हैं. They're where children go to sort of, and parents kind of feel safest to send their children to school. And now we've completely changed that idea. We've raised the walls school ki. It's very interesting what Naeem was saying, that this is our knee-jerk reaction. कि schools के हमने दीवारें ऊंची कर दी हैं, barbed wires लगा दिए हैं, snipers बिठा दिए हैं, CCTVs लगा दिए हैं. So what is that telling our children, and what is that telling these parents, that they're the ones who are sending their children to school? जब parents anxious होते हैं, so it's their anxiety that gets projected onto children. So I have had children coming up to me saying कि पहले तो अम्मी was okay with us going to school, अब वो हमें रोज़ाना पकड़ के पहले हमारे ऊपर दुरूद शरीफ फूंकती हैं, फिर हमें जाने देती हैं. अब जो है वो बैठ के हम रात को जो है दुआ मांगते हैं कि हमारे स्कूल में कल कोई आ नहीं जाए या कुछ वो नहीं हो जाए, और अगर कोई आएगा तो आपने क्या करना है, राइट? यू हैव टू प्रिटेंड, चिल्ड्रन आर कमिंग अप विद स्टोरीज लाइक कि उन्होंने हमें बोला कि यू हैव टू प्रिटेंड टू बी डैड, और you've got, one of the things that I was sharing is कि, some children saying कि we'll carry sort of bags of ketchup inside our uniform, we'll tie them so that we'll just prick on them if somebody comes, so that we'll pretend that we're already been shot. Okay? So when children are faced with these stories, we have to think about what is this doing to our psyche. And then, of course, 24/7, 100 plus channels that are constantly showing stories of blood and gore and people being hanged and people killing children and people being, and young suicide bombers and stuff. So I think that in itself is extremely anxiety provoking to children. And children manifest this in a lot of very different ways. Some children do okay. I will have to say that, children are resilient, adaptable, flexible, and, most of them do okay. But there is a narrative now that has started being played in our children's heads, which is one of terror, which is one of fear, which is one of anxiety. And that is definitely affecting them subtly. कुछ बच्चे आते हैं with sort of overt signs of anxiety, overt signs of aggressive behaviors, increase in disruptive behaviors. But also, I think as a community, we are raising a nation of children that are fearful and that are anxious. I'm going to stop here and then we'll just open up, answer questions.
Thank you very much, Ayesha. You've really highlighted some major issues of how the whole environment is affecting every one of us, but particularly children, because they're much more vulnerable, and they're also people who are a future. And if they're going in this environment with impaired mental health, what is it going to do to them in the future? So thank you very much. Dr. Saadia, you've also been back a couple of years or so. 1 year. You're working at a more primary care level. You're working with Aman Health. You've started this initiative. What has been your experience so far as you go around communities looking at what is the state? Just wanted to get a sense of someone who's been abroad and then come back and you're not working at a university or a hospital setup, but at a primary care. What is your view?
Thank you, Murad. It's very encouraging to see so many people in the room, and it just shows how much insight people are having and awareness of the problems that are there. When I first came, I remember Haroon Saab asking me, we had a conference and he asked me, "Tumhe kaise lag raha hai wapas aana?" And I was in my honeymoon phase and I said, it's great. And it's really wonderful, and the Karachi is so resilient and things are really doing well. And that was my initial reaction. But then as I spent time and saw what was happening at the grassroots level, gradually my impressions have changed, because resilience is all about coping abilities and how we react to stress. And obviously there's an assumption that it's a primitive evolutionary instinct, so all of us have it, which we do. I think the majority of people over here are resilient. But then what happens when you're constantly barraged by stressors of such a uncontrollable nature? that there comes a stage when your demands exceed capacity. So even though we are inherently resilient, but what we are exposed to is really taxing our capacity beyond our ability to cope. And that's where the problem lies. So I guess the good thing is that yes, we all have it in us. So how can we make ourselves a little bit more robust? And Murad asked me about that question. And that was the same dilemma that I was facing when I came back, that which is the area of mental health that I should work on that can really improve that. And I suppose I thought of more prevention and came towards the issue about how to educate people about mental health. Now coming back on resilience, we can talk about the mental health aspect later, is that resilience can, in a healthy way, it's very transformative, it's very encouraging, it makes you do good things. It's an opportunity for you to revisit things and rethink things and reappraise things, which can really help in terms of your development. But on the other hand, as Naeem was saying, that if you get into the phase, in the maladaptive coping phase, where you begin to withdraw and isolate yourself because you feel helpless and unable to make any change, then it does become a problem then. And that's what a lot of us are facing. Or else we then come to the other phase of denial, that I'm fine, nothing's wrong with me, I'm doing well. But actually you superficially seem to be doing well, but your body is taking the stress. And it manifests in physical symptoms, it manifests in immune deficiency symptoms, and you find so much of that in the city, that people are suffering from so many disorders which are related to stress. And not that, I'm saying that hamara kaam badh jayega, hum sare treat karne lage stress, but that is so interrelated, because resilience too is one of coping with many different stressors, physical, emotional, behavioral, environmental, so many different things. And there is no shortage of that in the city. So I think it's about how we can really empower ourselves, as Dr. Ayesha has also said, and Naeem has also said, we can keep on building barriers, or we can, people are just collecting weapons to protect themselves. And I went to a doctor's conference recently, and this issue was that there's so many, about 56 doctors have been killed in the last few years, and doctors should be getting weapons. But is that the answer? It's really, I don't have the answer, but I think that we all need to think very carefully that how do we make ourselves appraise the situation in a way that even if we can't change the environment, how can we cope with it better? So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Saadia. None of us has the answer, but collectively we all have the answer. So it's an important point. We all may have little bits of it. We put them together and we can come up with solutions. So I'm going to turn to you, Naeem. What are the answers? What are the solutions? I know you may not want to talk on the mental health issues, but the mental health of any community is inherently linked to its social development. And when we talk of social development, it means all of these things. How many weapons there are, what is the housing, what is the transport like, what is unemployment, and so on. So you can touch on any of this. What are the solutions?
Dr. Murad, the question that you ask will actually determine the shape of Pakistan in the days and years to come. The reason is that most of the institutions of the state have either become semi-functional or totally dysfunctional. So in that case, it is the ordinary citizens of the country which will need to come forward and try to do something. That is perhaps, to my mind, the only hope that is there for Pakistan. And Pakistan has remarkable people, and a large number of them. Just look at this KLF, and there are a few thousand people, extremely accomplished. However, there is a problem here, and that is that because they belong to a shrinking society, and they have a romantic notion that the Arab Spring happened because a lot of Egyptians unfriended Hosni Mubarak on their Facebooks, and therefore they have repeatedly resorted to that kind of a thing at a very large scale. Now that will not do the trick here. My suggestion here is that this segment of society, which is an enlightened, well-meaning, educated society, should get together physically in small groups, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever you can, on issues, on real issues of change, of reform. They could start from cleaning the beach to busting the Hubara issues, to reforms on the at the national level, changes in the constitution, to any subject. But there is, as you know, there is a reform needed in every segment. There is a need to do reform in, let's say, in education, where we don't even know how many schools are there and how many are open or how many are closed and so on. However, this wonderful segment of society at this point does not seem to be doing that. It somehow does not come out with rational solutions, researched solutions, and come up with them and say, this is how it ought to be done. Go to the comment, and with that collective force of that group, 10, 20, 50 people, put forward their points. Physically, I have a list of 20 items which I have been recommending over the years, that once you form a group, this is what you should do. I put it on the Facebook, unfortunately. But
can you hold the mic?
Yeah. Okay. So if you allow me, I will just say the few words out of this.
Yeah, if you can just point out the
Yes.
important ones.
Organize. First thing is organize in groups, physical groups, not on the Facebooks. Go and meet the members of the parliament. Write letters, articles. Go to the press. Do a phone call campaign. Use media, TV, radio. Organize teach-ins. Organize demonstrations. Put your point forward. Do advocacy, research, databases, do court cases, public interest litigation, is very weak area in Pakistan. Make press statements, public advertisements, vigils, sit-ins, civil disobedience but peaceful, theatre and publicity posters and so on. Last point, please do not resort to reacting to situations. An event happened and there is a vigil or a protest, and then that is it. No, sustain it, form a group, and the group should keep working on it for years if required. Actually, it will be required. I have been personally working on many issues for at least 10 years, and only now some of them have started to come on the surface. So that's my last advice. Thank you very much.
The issue Naeem has raised is a very important one. You know, many of us live here and have been living here for many years, but how many of us are actually invested in Pakistan? How many of us are actually engaged in issues here? And especially for the young people, it's very important what Naeem has raised, that unless and until we feel not just be living here and feel, you know, we're doing a great job, we've got to be engaged in issues. Once you start engaging in issues, then I think changes can take place. We do not have a critical mass of people in any of these areas. So Naeem is also part of the CTAC, the Citizens Trust Against Crime. Please go on the website, go on online and look at that and see how you can contribute to that. And there are many different subgroups within that CTAC, so please do that. Ayesha, I want to come to you. I'll come to you, Haroon Sahab, later. Ayesha, I want to ask you, in this kind of an environment which you have sketched so nicely, what kind of conversations, what kind of dialogue should we be having with the children?
So, I think it's the most important thing to do is to keep communication open. I think it's exceedingly important to keep talking to your children. So one of the things it should be, kind of very easy for everybody to sort of see that limit television as much as possible for everyone, but mostly for children. So I think that is just something that is exceedingly vital and extremely important. But other than that, I think that when things like the Peshawar incident, for example, happens, because every child knows about it, every child is talking about it, and every child has been affected by it. हर एक के स्कूल में कुछ ना कुछ हुआ है, हर एक के स्कूल में प्रिंसिपल ने जाके स्पीचेस दी हैं कि और या बच्चों को बताया है कि स्ट्रेंजर से बात नहीं करना, ऐसा हो तो आप इनको बता देना, ऑफिशियल को बता देना. So everybody has been affected. It's important to let them talk. It's important to let them come to you and ask that this is what I'm concerned about, this is what I'm worried about. And based on उस बच्चे की समझ कितनी है, उस बच्चे की उम्र कितनी है, वो कितना समझ पाता है इन चीज़ों को, कितना sensitive है, because every parent knows their child well. Talk to them and explain to them and have them ask questions and respond to those questions. In terms of positive, I have to tell you that one of the things that you can absolutely do for your children is to really focus on the positives, जो कि बहुत कम होते हैं लेकिन हैं. they're happening. So what was the good that came out once, for example, the Peshawar incident happened? There were people who, went there to work on things. There were sort of, people went out, people protested, vigils happened, small little things were done. Unke bache, the ones who had survived actually started little blogs, started writing letters for their friends who had passed away, and those are all good things that was happening around that time. So it's important कि आप बच्चों को थोड़ा सा focus change करके बताएं. There were lots of very, very good articles that were written by people. So having them read them, having them talk, think about what goodness comes out of badness that happens. Okay, थोड़ी देर के लिए हर एक के ज़मीर यहाँ पे जागते हैं, फिर as Naeem also said कि फिर वो ख़त्म हो जाता है and stuff. But what is it that they can do in terms of sustaining some interest in what has happened? This is great. So things like KLF, CLF होने वाला है. Little things that children can do. Have them do small little projects. Get your children to collect some or write some stories, write some poems for these children who've passed away, and have them present in sort of platforms like CLF, for example. So those are really great things that you can do, and children actually respond really well to positivity like that. And then again, curtailing your anxiety, not constant. I'm going to use this is my pet peeve, use this platform to say that please think about these WhatsApp groups जो parents के होते हैं, class parents के and class mothers के. They're extremely anxiety provoking, and lots of there's this constant, अच्छा अब ये हो गया, अच्छा अब कल ये खबर आ गई है, उसके ISI, उसका फादर और उसका रिश्तेदार इज एन ISI ऑफिसर और उसने पर्सनली जाके बताया है कि ये वाली जगह पे जो है कल ये वाले स्कूल में बॉम्ब ब्लास्ट होने वाला है, तो अब हम क्या करें, बच्चों को भेजें, बच्चों, एंड इट लाइक कीप्स the anxiety keeps going up and up and up until suddenly it's gotten out of control. So it's extremely important for mothers and parents to really understand that their responsibility. Yes, there is a lot of fear, but how much of it is true? How much of it is real? What is fact and what is fiction that we've created? What is a story that we've built up in our heads? और उसको हमने इतना ज़्यादा हावी कर लिया अपने ऊपर that somehow that story becomes much bigger than the reality. So I think it's very important for us as parents to know that, because जब हमारे दिमाग में वो story बन जाती है, that gets projected onto children and then they feel anxious. So again, really trying to understand what is the fear, what is the reality, telling your kids that you're trying to take care of them as much as possible, but having them, within the reality ke sphere mein, this is how much we can do, and this is what we have done for you, and we will be there for you. And then after that, I think it's children are also very wise and very smart these days, so they kind of figure out things on their own as well. So that's what I say, that just keep the communication open and try to be as positive and as less anxious within yourself as much as possible.
Thank you, Ayesha. And Ayesha has raised a very important point that no matter how horrific the event, it's very important after we've had a period of being affected by that to just stand back, to collect the thoughts, and to then what is called circumscribing the threat, to not blow it out of proportion, not to deny that, but to look at realistically what the threat is. Because no matter how sad it is that people have been killed, the rest of us have to go on. So it is very important to understand that, and this is what Ayesha is saying, communication is really the key. Saadia, I want to come to you. You've talked about emotional resiliency. How can we, ordinary people, have very little control? I know Naeem has said that we should be engaged, we should have small groups and contribute, but at personal levels, at family level, what can we do to increase our emotional resiliency?
Absolutely. Well, there are two different types of stressors. Where there are those that we can control, Naeem has said problem-solving approach is very important, that we deal with it at the appropriate levels. But when it comes to individual, then it's a different matter. And these days, if there's one little incident that happens because of the media, the physical footprint is very limited, but the psychological footprint is not just limited to the person who goes through the stress or his immediate family, but it affects the community as a whole. In fact, it has a global impact. So then it becomes completely out of reach. But what we can do is the individual impact. So what are the sort of things we can do to make ourselves a little bit more robust? And I suppose, many things come to mind, but probably the most important are, things that we are very familiar and we rely on. So we, generally our own health, how we take care of our nutrition, food, taking meals at regular times, hydration, sleep is one thing, exercise, and then also to remain in contact with people, have, really build on our support systems, to have people whom we can talk to, whom we can rely on, and try and grow and expand that network so that we can have an opportunity not only to discuss the things that are going on in our lives, but also to talk to others and give them the support they require. And on a biological level, it is very useful as well, because the kind of hormones and chemicals that are released when you sit together and have a warm, a good conversation it actually negates the impact of the stress hormones. So there is a biological correlate as well in being, with people and having the social networks. But obviously, along with that, it's very important that we begin to appraise for things that we cannot control and are out of our reach. We do need to stop and think and appraise that, is this really uncontrollable? What can we do? And there, the solutions lie within ourselves, that how can we make ourselves a little bit stronger by recognizing the symptoms of stress that we are going through. And for that, education is important, recognizing what are the early signs of stress, what are the chronic signs of stress, and seeking appropriate help for that. And nowadays there's a lot of information, and all the people in the room I'm sure have access to a lot of knowledge. Is very cheap and very easily accessible. It's the application of knowledge which is more difficult. So I think everybody can reach out and find out about what are the common signs of stress and when to seek help. On the preventive side, I think there are a lot of, not a lot, but there are a few programs, and the one that we have adopted in Aman Foundation is really an Australian model, and that is called mental health first aid. And it doesn't mean that you become psychiatrists or clinicians by doing this course. It's simply to being aware of what mental illnesses are about, what are signs of stress, what are the crises you encounter, how do you cope with them. And if you have anybody in your family or in your network who's going through that, how can you really approach them, and how can you encourage them to seek appropriate help? So there are things going around. I remember when I first started it, people started querying, "Ye kya cheez hai? What are you talking about?" And after this Peshawar incident, the number of queries we've had about when are you doing the courses and what is it, and so many people are reaching out to find out what it is. So there are two different things, two different approaches. One is a general approach about really educating people about mental health, and that's called mental health first aid, which is very similar to physical first aid. And the other is psychological first aid, which is more specific and related to traumas. Like, for example, the Peshawar incident that happened. That's a completely different realm where you're actually dealing with the here and now and what you can do to help the people who are victims and survivors. And that is based more on an approach which is of looking at the basic needs of the individual, and think you don't start giving them counseling and therapy at that stage. It's just making them comfortable, reassuring them, supporting them, connecting them with their networks, providing them with all kinds of any support that they require in terms of their basic needs, and linking them with all communication channels and officials or networks which can be of help, even though we know it's often the contrary. So these are the sort of things we can reach out to. And then if people pick up signs of symptoms that are more enduring and that can possibly be related to mental illness, then they can be referred to the appropriate people for help. So those are the two areas where we can build ourselves. And of course, the personal bit about self-help and faith is the biggest. Spiritual, help is the most important, and something we all are very familiar with and use. And these are the times in crisis that we resort to those, and they're extremely beneficial. The other thing in our community, which is really should be encouraged a lot more, is volunteerism, giving out to others. We don't have too much of that instinct, and when you go out and reach out to volunteers, people are very hesitant to come forward. And volunteering is also a very, very it's almost close to faith, really, because you're actually giving to people at a time of need, and the reward that you get is not something you get in this world, but certainly the spirituality of it and the connection that you have with people through volunteering is something which, as a community, we can easily, we all have time, and some of us do, but this is an area where we can develop a lot more, and that also helps in building resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Saadia. Churchill once said that you make a living by what you get, but you make a life by what you give. And I think what Saadia is saying about volunteering is really fits into that. So the more you give, I think the more you make a life for yourself. Now we've got about 15 minutes left. I'm going to open the floor to question and answers. Raise your hands. I don't think we'll be able to take all questions, but we'll try and give everyone a turn. But please listen to this very carefully. Questions should be short. I do not want any speeches. I'm going to cut you off. Okay? Okay. आप बताइए.
Yes.
Introduce yourself and keep your question short.
Hi, my name is Ali Hassan and I'm a banker by profession. My question is from Ms. Quraishy. Don't you think that celebrating resilience can be considered detrimental to society? For example, because if we are resilient.
That's fine. Okay. Next question. इनको दे दीजिए.
अस्सलामुअलैकुम, मेरा नाम मनीज़ा है. मेरा क्वेश्चन आई गेस तीनों साइकाइट्रिस्ट स्पेशली है कि क्या जो आजकल के हालात हैं उनका लिंक आप लोग साइकोटिक डिसऑर्डर्स जैसे कि स्किज़ोफ्रेनिया और बाइपोलर डिसऑर्डर्स और इनके साथ देखते हैं या नहीं, कंसिडरिंग के बहुत से डिलूजन्स और हालुसिनेशंस.
That's fine. Okay. आप
I have a follow-up question.
Quickly.
Okay. The second question. Sorry. This is
Don't
actually
waste
stressing
time.
me
Quick,
out.
ask the question.
This is actually stressing me out. The follow-up question is that अगर आप लोग if this is the case, तो फिर लोगों के साथ कैसे काम किया जा सकता है? क्या जो नईम साहब कह रहे हैं, is that the solution or is it still a one-on-one counseling medication?
Okay. आपका सवाल क्या है? We'll take a few questions and then we'll divide them.
My question is, my name is Ali Sajid. I'm from.
Mic आगे रखिए.
I'm from Nishtar Medical College, Multan. My question is for Dr. Ayesha Mian. My question is that seeing how children are growing up in the shadow of bomb blasts and violence, do you think this generation will be damaged when they grow up, when they are in positions of power, and
Fine.
can this be curtailed?
Right. उनको दे दीजिए.
My name is Mariam. I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. I'm actually wondering if there's any positive impact that the Sufis and the shrines and all of that alternate system has.
Okay. एक और question ले लें and then we'll answer. एक minute, please. Yeah.
मेरा सवाल डॉक्टर आयशा से है कि जो 10 साल से कम उम्र के बच्चे होते हैं उनको एंटी साइकोटिक मेडिकेशन देना सही है या नहीं है, इस पर थोड़ा सा हमें कुछ बता दीजिए.
नहीं, ये this is a clinical question. We are not going to take that over here. So can you talk on ये जैसे इन्होंने कहा कि emotional resilience का कोई negative impact भी हो सकता है?
I don't think that emotional resilience has any negative impact. It's very useful, and in the fact that it keeps you in contact with your emotions is very powerful, because that helps you in terms of coping with and preventing mental disorders from developing. So I would say that it's a very it's a positive thing, not negative.
Okay, Ayesha, about children growing up, how damaged they could be. Would there be any long-term effects from these events?
So no, as a complete generation, if you're saying that will they be damaged, the answer is it all depends on what we are doing with them now. So not necessarily. If we are able to deal, there's a lot of positivity going around here, and if we are able to deal with that and approach and address some of the things that are happening in a positive way as adults, they're not, just because there is terror and stuff outside, that does not make them a damaged population.
और आपका क्या सवाल था? सॉरी भूल गया तुमने.
I'd like to.
जी हारून साहब.
The question was whether the trauma that people are going through, young children going through, what is going to affect them later on. In fact, we have documented from 1995. At that time, we charted out that those young people who are 5 years or 6 years old, when they are 20 around, what is going to happen. In fact, this is what is happening, that it was at that time predicted that these children are traumatized, and once they are traumatized and society is in such a stressful situation, then there are various ways of reaction. So to this question that this is what is now happening is because of whatever has been. His earlier question was that how have we arrived here? I think you have not addressed that. If there's time, then I'd like to expand on this.
जी आप कुछ कमेंट करना चाह रहे हैं? एक आप कमेंट कर दीजिए पहले.
I find regarding students after this having December, I think students have been distanced.
Can you just speak up? Can you stand up and speak up a little bit?
آپ بولیے میں ریپیٹ کر دوں گی.
Another teacher, we felt that students are distancing from their parents. Do you feel that when they come to you, distancing because of this terror that is all around us?
So children will not.
Because they don't want to talk about it when we ask them to draw something. They just do whatever. I mean,
Right. So
we feel that there was no impact.
Okay. So children are not distancing from their parents. Children don't. I mean, that's not the normal psychology of children to distance themselves from their adults or from their teachers or from their parents. So if they are, then it's, I think, something for us to think about, for us to ponder. कि ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है कि बच्चे are not trusting us enough as adults to come forward and let us know what they're going on. Now, it's possible that bache may not acutely do it because it might be too traumatizing or too much in their face right now. They may do it 3 months later, they may do it 6 months later, saal ke baad, ya phir never. Some children don't, and that's okay too. But we need to give them the opportunity to do it.
क्या था आपका सेकंड फॉलोअप क्या था? हाँ मैं समझ गया, बस ठीक है. वो जो दूसरा आपका सवाल जरा क्रिटिकल है.
पहला सवाल ये कि ये जो हालात हैं ये साइकोटिक डिसऑर्डर्स में मैनिफेस्ट कर सकते हैं या नहीं, ये आई थिंक
You can answer
that. By and large नहीं. So the stress related disorders are a little different, and most of the psychotic disorders that are very serious disorders may be influenced by all of these, but by and large वो नहीं होते इतना. ठीक. जी 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 प्लीज.
You can have the mic.
आप दोनों prominent psychiatrists and mental health professionals, क्या हम लोग अगले साल भी यही बात कर रहे होंगे इसी स्टेज पे बैठ के? ये आप लोगों ने कोई पिछले 25 साल में कोई ऐसा सेल्फ हेल्प या आपने कोई सपोर्ट ग्रुप डेवलप किया है, कोशिश की है, जो महीने में एक दफा बैठे लोगों को काउंसिल करे, बताए, अपने इश्यूज बताएं? जैसे आपने बोला कि नॉर्मली बात करने से, लोग वेंट आउट करने से बहुत सारी फीलिंग्स आपकी निकल जाती हैं. बिकॉज आई एम ऑल्सो अभी ट्रॉमा हुआ, माई कजन वॉज किल्ड. सो उसके बाद से हमें महसूस हुआ, रोजाना लोगों के बच्चे मरते थे, पता नहीं चलता था, अपना मरा तो पता चला क्या इशू था. लेकिन ये क्या यहाँ पे कोई ऐसा आपने कोई सपोर्ट ग्रुप डेवलप किया है जहाँ आके हम लोग बात कर सकें? हमें दवाइयाँ नहीं चाहिए.
फाइन. रॉयल
वी जस्ट नीड टू कम एंड टॉक ऑन दिस पॉइंट्स ताकि हम कुछ कर सकें. या हम अगले साल फिर वही बातें कर रहे हैं.
एक मिनट. रॉयल कॉलेज ऑफ साइकाइट्रिस्ट रिकमेंड करता है यूके का कि 20 से 25 हज़ार पॉपुलेशन पे एक साइकाइट्रिस्ट होना चाहिए. आपको पाकिस्तान में पता है क्या है शुमार? 1 साइकाइट्रिस्ट टू 1 मिलियन पीपल. 200 मिलियन की पॉपुलेशन है, 200 साइकाइट्रिस्ट हैं, उसमें से जो प्रॉपर्ली ट्रेन साइकाइट्रिस्ट है ना, वो शायद आपको 100 से कम मिले. सो प्रॉब्लम ये होता है. बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. सो प्रॉब्लम यस तो प्रॉब्लम ये है कि बिल्कुल हमारी भी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है और बाकियों की भी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है जो पर्स स्ट्रिंग्स वो कंट्रोल करते हैं कि इन चीज़ों को बढ़ाया जाए. सो वी डू रिकॉग्नाइज द प्रॉब्लम, यस, एंड वी आर डूइंग एज मच एज वी कैन, एंड वी लाइक मोर पीपल टू जॉइन अस इन डूइंग दैट. जी जी प्लीज़ एक मिनट. जी जी जी.
सादिक साहब से सवाल करना चाहती हूँ कि आपने बताया कि आप एड्रेस कर रहे थे हमारी जैसे प्रिविलेज्ड और रिलेटिवली प्रिविलेज्ड क्लास के लोग कि वो मिल के बैठें और कुछ एक्टिवली करें इस माशरे में बेहतरी लाने के लिए. क्या आपका ख्याल है कि इस तरह के रिफॉर्म से वाकई फंडामेंटल तब्दीली आएगी बगैर पॉलिटिकल प्रोसेस में इंगेज हुए हुए, बगैर पॉलिटिकल पार्टी बनाए हुए?
With free access available to 4 psychiatrists, I see no reason why you should be asking me questions. However, देखिए, whatever work we do, it is political in nature. Even that small Hubara busted protest outside was political in nature. It related to with foreign countries and with Foreign Office of Pakistan and with the Government of Pakistan. तो काम तो हर एक जो भी हम करते हैं वो उसमें एक पॉलिटिक्स का कॉनोटेशन तो होता है. अब क्या हमें उसके ऊपर एक पॉलिटिकल पार्टी बनानी चाहिए या नहीं, वो तो एक इंडिविजुअल ग्रुप का ही डिसीजन हो सकता है. जहां आप समझते हैं कि आपको बनानी चाहिए आप बनाइए. मगर मैंने जो आपसे अर्ज़ की थी वो ये थी कि भले आप पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज न बनाएं, जिसको इलेक्टोरल पॉलिटिक्स कहते हैं, उसमें ना जाइए, मगर आप अपने एसोसिएशंस, ग्रुप्स, ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस तो बना के हज़ारों शोबों में काम कर सकते हैं और उसमें रिफॉर्म और चेंजेस या ला सकते हैं या उनके लिए पुश कर सकते हैं. इन दोनों चीज़ों को हमें करना चाहिए. और मेरी एक सजेशन ये है कि क्योंकि हमारी नॉर्मल ज़िंदगी तो गुजरती है एक प्रोफेशनल या कमर्शियल काम करने में, क्योंकि हमें एक अपनी ज़िंदगी को रोटी भी कमानी होती है, तो हम एक थोड़ा सा हिस्सा समथिंग लाइक 10 to 20% ऐसे कामों में हमें हर वक्त लगाने चाहिए जो कि इस नेचर के हैं, जो कि हमारी कम्युनिटी को इम्पैक्ट करते हैं या जिसमें हम कुछ वॉलंटियरिज्म कर सकते हैं. थैंक यू.
जी माइक दे दीजिए इनको. हाँ जी.
I myself have been through this experience too, very stressful days, even though I don't have any school-going children or grandchildren.
Yeah. Ayesha.
Again, I think the onus lies on parents. मेरे पास जब भी कोई बच्चे लेकर आता है, मैं parents को lecture देना शुरू कर देती हूँ. They get very upset at me. But I think that the onus lies on our parents. Why are our children exposed so much to the maids and the servants without some oversight? I think one, that is very important because that is a big concern. And two, I think, I mean, again, you can't, आप हर वक्त नहीं manage कर सकते कि वो उनके साथ अकेले ना जाएं, उनको नहीं करें. But then also, because now they are our household members, I think the onus again lies on us to sort of talk to them as well. And sort of help them, talk to them and help them and train them in what, you know, whatever little, किस तरह से बात करनी है, ये हम बात नहीं करेंगे, ये नहीं करेंगे, because they are our household members. So I think again, you know, it's an important point that you're raising, and we just need to be very, very hyper vigilant about it.
बहुत ज़्यादा हो रहा है. यानी जिस वक्त 16 दिसंबर का ये वाक़या हुआ, लोगों की मेहंदियाँ, शादियाँ, गाने के प्रोग्राम्स, डांस, लोगों ने नहीं रोके. उनके बच्चों को ये कहा गया, अरे ये तो होता ही रहेगा, कब तक हम अपनी चीज़ें रोकें. तो इसमें हम इनसेंसिटिव होने से भी तो लोगों को रोकना हमारे लिए नफ्सियाती तौर पर ज़रूरी है.
आपने सही कहा कि यू नो ऑब्वियसली जब बड़े बड़े सानहे होते हैं तो सब पे असर पड़ता है, लेकिन ये कि ज़िंदगी भी चलती रहती है. लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि आप उसको जिस दिन ऐसा वाक़या हो तो आप उसको यू गो टू द अदर एक्सट्रीम. लेकिन टू सम एक्सटेंट यू नीड टू मेंटेन sobriety and respect for the dead and for the incident that's happened, acknowledge what's happened, accept what happened, but life does go on and nothing will stop for anything. And I think in a way we go into what terrorists want by actually submitting to their will and creating the fear environment. And the fact that we carry on normal lives, it actually defeats the purpose of terrorists. So we do need to show our resilience by actually carrying on with our daily routines.
देखिए इस महफिल में हम लोगों ने हमारे रेजिलियंस को बहुत सराहा है कि यहाँ बहुत रेजिलियंट है, लोग बहुत रेजिलियंट है. और हमने बात की है यहाँ जो लोग बैठे हुए हैं वो मेरा ज़ाती ख्याल है कि उनके लिए तो जो कुछ मशवरा दिया गया है बहुत अच्छा है. लेकिन मैं इस दरमियान में 16 दिसंबर के बाद 16 तारीख के बाद पीली स्कूलों में भी गया हूँ कि वहाँ क्या हाल है, क्या डर है या नहीं है. میں نے देखा ہے کہ نہ تو उनकी दीवारें ऊंची की गई हैं बल्कि इनसे और खौफ पैदा हो गया है उनमें बच्चों में भी न ही वहाँ इस किस्म की कोई गुफ्तगू हो रही है. हमने जब कहा कि हम आके टीचर्स और पेरेंट्स को बात करना चाहते हैं कि डरे हुए हैं, अगर डरे हुए हैं तो कैसे हैं, क्योंकि हम एक वो वर्कशॉप बनाया हमने, लेकिन वहाँ मैंने इतना रेजिलियंस जो देखा है वो मेरा ख्याल है ऐसे लोगों में जो कि पढ़े लिखे लोग हैं, जिन्होंने कि अपनी दीवारें ऊँचे करवा ली हैं, जिन्होंने टेलीफोन नहीं है तो मोबाइल ले लिया है, हम कहाँ तक आ गए हैं कि बंदूक दी जा रही है सबको. तो ये जैसे बात कही गई थी कि जो आज हम कह रहे हैं क्या कल भी वही करेंगे, हम 10 साल से यही बात कर रहे हैं. बात यह है कि हमने फर्स्ट एड का जिक्र हुआ है आज, बल्कि ये कि वजह क्या है, मेरा ख्याल है पॉलिटिकल पार्टी बनाने की बात अलग है, लेकिन एटलीस्ट मेंटल हेल्थ कोई हमारे मुल्क में कोई प्रोग्राम होना चाहिए. देयर इज़ नो मेंटल हेल्थ पॉलिसी इन पाकिस्तान. ग्रुप्स में पिंडी में, लाहौर में, यहाँ हम लोगों ने जो कुछ किया है इसका कोई ख़ास इम्पैक्ट नहीं है, छोटी सी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, लेकिन हम जो कहते हैं, कहना चाहते हैं, करना चाहते हैं, वो हमारी हुकूमत नहीं सुनती है. पिछले 10 साल से मैं कोशिश कर रहा हूँ कि एक इदारा बनाऊँ, लेकिन ये कि चीफ मिनिस्टर से मेरे याद अल्लाह थोड़ी है, लेकिन ये कि उनको यहाँ इस मेंटल हेल्थ के मुतालिक कुछ बात नहीं करनी है, ना उन्होंने कुछ देना है. तो मैं कहना ये चाहता हूँ कि जो हाउ वी अराइव्ड हियर इज़ ए हिस्ट्री, कंटेम्प्रेरी हिस्ट्री, और उसमें जो कुछ खामियां होती रही हैं और जिस तरह हमने स्पेस रिलीजियस स्यूडो रिलीजियस और रिलीजियस पार्टीज़ को इंडक्ट किया है पॉलिटिक्स में, और अब जो हालात हैं मेरा ख्याल है कि वजह ये है. तो इसलिए हमें पॉलिटिकल पार्टी बनाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, लेकिन ये कि हमें इसके समझने की ज़रूरत है कि हम यहाँ पहुँचे हैं तो किस तरह पहुँचे हैं और इसका क्या मदावा है. मदावा यही नहीं है कि एक्सरसाइज कर लिया जाए, योगा कर लिया जाए, आप इस मतलब ये कि वॉक कर लें, लेक्सोटेनल खा लें, ये बात तो सबको मालूम है, लेकिन ये कि हम सबको जो यहाँ ऐसे लोग बैठे हुए हैं कि हमें जिस हालत में हम पहुँचे हैं ये क्यों पहुँचे हैं और हमें क्या करना चाहिए. इसमें मैं एक बात ज़रूर कहूँगा कि एक लादीनियत, मतलब ये कि जो हमारे यहाँ एक तर्जुमा किया गया है सेकुलरिज्म का, वो अजीब है. हम चाहते हैं कि इस मुल्क में रवादारी हो, मतलब ये कि एक दूसरे को समझने की कोशिश करें, एम्पैथी हो, लेकिन उसके लिए हमारा माहौल नहीं है. तो माहौल हमें कोशिश ये करना चाहिए कि हमारी हुकूमत को सेकुलर होना चाहिए.
Yes, I had a question. We were talking about having a psychiatric person for a normal audience in the country. I have heard in the US there are the psychiatrists who are looking after the politicians as well. And with all due respect to every party, can we have any psychiatric who can have who can look after all the people looking after the government agencies and the bureaucrats? Just all due respect, ma'am.
No, I think it's important that you don't waste your resources. You should only concentrate where you think you can make about changes. So we're going to on this very interesting note, we're going to end this session, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending this. I hope you can go from here with the message that we are under a lot of stress. Pakistan's condition and is such that it's creating a lot of stress. It's going to be there with us for quite a long time. So आपका जो point था वो सही था, and we all have to sit and see what we can do. There is a term called upstream factors. We are looking at downstream factors only. We are looking at how we can raise the walls and protect the children and so on. What are the determinants that are causing all these things to happen? They are the upstream factors, the macro level factors. And until and unless we also address that, and Naeem ne jaise ideas diye hain to organize ourselves and do that, unless and until we address the underlying macro level factors, the social determinants of mental ill health, I do not think we can turn around this country. So I'd like to quote the Chilean poet Pablo Neruda, who wrote that, "Rise up with me against this misery of organization."